Welcome to Sexy Mom Abundant Life with best-selling author and coach Kathy Williams, a show to help you tap into the support of the universe and access the abundance that's available in every area of your life. Listen in for conversations and tools to create more ease, joy, and possibility with family, relationships, business, and living. Kathy's joyful perspective will help you tap into your own wisdom and create a life of presence and abundance your way. Listen live on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, or anytime on iTunes or at IOM-FM.
Welcome, everyone, to Sexy Mom Abundant Life. This is Kathy Williams, and I'm joined today by a guest who has inspired me over the past 4 years or so with his gifts and his teachings, and really the teachings of the guides. Paul Selig is one of the foremost spiritual channels in the world today, and he has channeled 11 books, including I Am the Word, Beyond the Known, Realization, and now released, as of yesterday, the book Alchemy. So we're going to talk today about alchemy and what that is and how you can tap into your own knowing and much more. I'm so delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
So we have lots of questions from listeners, and one of the first questions is, what is alchemy, and how can we do that in our lives?
Well, the guides, I'm not the author of the books. I take dictation. So the guides that I work with literally deliver the whole thing through me in front of audiences at this point, and the recordings are transcribed. The teaching of alchemy, which is the newest teaching, it's the 9th book. No, that's the 3, 6, 7, 8. It's the 8th book. They're finishing the 9th now. That they've delivered is really speaking about how the realization of the inherent divinity in anything and everything transforms it, or what they say is lifts it to what they call to the upper room, which they say is a higher state of consciousness that they can support us in aligning to. So alchemy comes from the upper room because the one who's vibrating at that level really becomes a doorway to the higher realms, or a transistor transposer of vibration and energy.
So I guess the next question would be, how do we get there? We have so much conditioning to fear and old patterns, and what.
That's what the book is about. The book is about how one gets there. But it's a process. This isn't magical thinking. This isn't wish fulfillment. This isn't how to manifest a better job. It's not those things. It's about a level of consciousness that is accessible to all of us. The guides say that we're operating in a shared field. They call it an octave with high notes and low notes. They say everything that we're experiencing here is in this octave that we know of as our reality. What the guides are teaching is they're saying they're lifting us to the octave above. They call that the upper room. And they say, any note sung, any note played on a piano can be played in a higher octave into infinity. And because we're all in vibration, the vibrational field that we're operating in, inclusive of our form, is basically transposed to operate in a higher way. So the process of getting there, in a lot of ways, is the process of releasing the false ideas of who we are, who we think we are, who we think we're supposed to be, through prior indoctrination. The guides say what is true is always true, and they say the truth of all of us is what they call the divine self, or the God within. We can call it whatever you want to. It really doesn't matter. And the realization of the inherent divine is the teaching, and it's the full teaching. The guides are teaching us how to realize, which means know, and express our innate divinity. And from that place, we're actually alchemizing everything that we encounter.
As I was reading one of your books recently, you mentioned that by essentially being that vibration, you have a huge impact on the people around you and the world. And that doesn't preclude action either.
That's correct. You know, I mean, we're always expressing our consciousness, always. We can't help but do that. The guides I work with say that everything that we see or can bear witness to, we're in accord to. And they say accord, A-C-C-O-R-D or A-C-H-O-R-D, as on a piano, which means vibratory resonance or tone. When you're lifting to the higher resonance by nature of being, you lift what you encounter. It's entrainment. It's, you know, everything lifts to the higher. So the guides make it pretty simple for us. They say the action of fear is to claim more fear. They say, look at every choice you've ever made in fear and see what it got you. Probably it'll be more of the same. And they also say who you put in darkness or what you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. And you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. It's hypocrisy and it's impossible. So what they're teaching us really is the simplicity of the idea, what you bless blesses you in return, and what you damn damns you back. And if you begin to think in those terms, you'll see how already your resonant field and your consciousness is informing the reality that you hold.
As you say that, I reflect on the world today and how much there is damning of different perspectives, whether that's your neighbor who doesn't wear a mask or your, you know, it's like there is so much pushing against.
Yeah, well, I think we've always been this way, and I think we're just seeing it now. I think that's part of what we're dealing with. In the guides, I don't know what it was. I think it was their 5th book. It was called The Book of Truth. They said, and this was right before the last presidential election this book was dictated, and they said, you know, what we're about to see is the presence of the vibration of truth, which is basically to be upturning all the stones. They say it's going to be like living in an excavation site. What was buried 5 weeks ago gets, you know, uncovered in 5,000 years ago. And that's not so we can blame it or shame it or make it wrong. It's so that we can see it, so that it can be transformed. Nothing gets transformed until it's seen. We just want to blame it, you know, but, you know, the light shines on all things, and the purpose of the light is to illumine. And when something is illumined, it can be transformed, or the guides would say reknown in a higher way. So I think some of what we're dealing with now is what's always been there, but we've pretended wasn't. And so this then becomes opportunity to transform. I hope so, at least.
I do too, definitely. And the new book, Alchemy, mentions that we're kind of like on an elevator that's between floors right now. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the experience of the book, and it was for me as it was being dictated. It was the hardest book I've ever had to live through, because I was living through the teachings as they were dictating it. The guides say, you know, if you've been living in a basement apartment, you're used to the view from the basement window. And when you start going up, or when you go to, say, you move into an apartment on the 10th floor that's, you know, bright and open, the first thing you do is you say, oh, my God, where's my scrapbook? Or, oh, my God, where's my divorce papers? Oh, my God, where are my bills? And you go right back down to the basement, to the known, because that's where you're comfortable. You can't imagine yourself without your idea of your history mandating certain requirements of behavior from you. So the process of sort of being in the elevator in some ways is the process of releasing what you need to release in order to take the new residence. You really can't bring everything with you. And the stuff that really doesn't get to come is the judgment, the fear, the resentment, the hatred of self and others, all that stuff. You know, those things that the guides would say would tether us or tie us to fear or to the low vibration, they say can and will be addressed through this process. So it really is a process of personal change or personal alchemy that then gets sort of translated to everything that you encounter.
And so in this process of releasing the past constructs and you know, elevating to the next floor, the books give different attunements or the guides give different attunements and things to say. And, as one thing I've always loved about these books is that you can feel a resonance as you do the attunements.
Yeah. The guides say that the books operate on two levels. There are the words on the page, which provide an intellectual construct for the teaching. But the real teaching is the interplay or conversation between the guides and the energy of the book and the student of the book. So, and this has been the case since the very first book was dictated in 2009. It was published in 2010. Nobody knew who I was or what these books were about. And the reviews started coming in on Amazon, and people were saying, I'm reading this book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading this book and I'm seeing auras. My favorite was, I'm reading this book and my husband is changing. It was funny and it was fascinating, but that's what the guides said would happen. So the books are an experience. They're journeys themselves. They're not just more information. The attunements that the guides work with they call them claims of truth. And they say we're all radios, we're all radios. We're always playing a station, which is our consciousness. And what they're doing with us is giving us the ability to play the higher broadcast that they say has always been there. We just didn't know how to play it. So that's the teaching.
That's beautiful. And it relates back to alchemy because the guides said that this is not something new. It's just returning to what you are, your true self.
Yeah, they say again and again and again, you can't make anything holy. It already is. But you can and have denied the inherent divinity in everything. So this is really about restoration to our true nature. It's about releasing the ideas of who we are that would seek to deny the light, deny God, deny the divine, whatever you really want to call it. So again, you can't make anything holy. It already is. And it's that awareness that the divine already is, which they say is really the antidote to all of our challenges. They say the only real problem that we have as a species is this continuous denial of the inherent divine, putting things in darkness, which is the root of war and this cause of this belief in separation from one another and from our source that we've become so invested in.
So I'd love to ask about this in relation to that. The idea that we are complicit with all we see, right?
Yeah.
So I'm complicit with my neighbor doing whatever annoying activity. I'm complicit with the war in Afghanistan. Can you say more about that? Because I think on some level there's resistance to that for a lot of people. I don't like that thing. Yeah.
Well, I think we're using the language in different ways. So when the guides say we'll use the word agreement. We're in agreement to everything that we experience. So I'm in agreement to the neighbor that I don't like. I'm in agreement to the fact that there is what they call a war in this other country. I'm in agreement to the collective circumstances. Now, the New Agers sometimes say, well, you create your own reality. You create it all. The guides I work with actually say, well, the individual consciousness is creative and is creating, but we're also creating through collective agreement. And collective agreement is what this is really speaking to in some ways. Now, if I can accept that I am in agreement to something, that simply means that the consciousness that I hold is informing it. So when they first started teaching this through me, I was struggling with the concept. And I think I said to the guides, and I think this is in one of the books, so does that mean if there's a book on a table in Paris, my consciousness is informing the book on the table in Paris? And the guide said, yes, the moment you know of the book on the table in Paris, you're in agreement to it. You're in vibratory accord to it, which simply means that your consciousness is informing it. Now, let's go back to the simple idea. What you bless, blesses you in return. What you damn, damns you back. So if you damn your neighbor because you can't stand your neighbor, that becomes your experience. And you're also informing the relationship through your or anger or frustration or fear, or whatever that may be. So you're complicit at that level to the problem. The guides have said you can't lift an evil man to the upper room because you have made him evil, because you're knowing that man or deciding about that man at that level of consciousness. And we like to do that individually and culturally, and it tends to be in our own self-righteousness. And the guides have said self-righteousness is always the small self, and the small self, as they describe it, is simply the personality structure, the egoic structure that we operate with, which they call, it's a mask. It's not who we truly are. It's just how we've identified ourselves through prior experience.
Wow. So as we go into the next section of the show in a moment, I would love to hear more about the upper room and what you suggest for getting there. Yes, if I hold a man in darkness, if I think that they're bad or stupid or whatever, they can't go to the upper room. Like, it's me who's called them that, and I'm holding myself out of the upper room.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So,
exactly right.
And in relation to world events as well, there's a lot of push-pull about what's going on right now, and frustration, and let's lift it all to the upper room. So we're going to take a break and be back in just a moment with some questions, and let's lift to the upper room. Thanks so much for listening to Sexy Mom Abundant Life, everyone. And thank you so much, Paul, for being here with me.
You're welcome.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What Is Going On. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to Sexy Mom Abundant Life. I'm so grateful you're here. As a listener, you can pop over to meetkathywilliams.com and get 20% off any item in the shop, including videos, energy pulls, even private sessions, by entering the code SMRadio. Also at meetkathywilliams.com, you can download a free Create Your Life exercise and join me for online classes and Hawaii retreats. And if you're stuck, helping you get unstuck is my specialty. I'd love to work with you one-on-one.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Sexy Mom Abundant Life. This is your host, Kathy Williams, and I am joined today by Paul Selig, the author of 9 books. I misspoke earlier, although you're always dictating books, far ahead of the time. So, and we are talking about lifting your vibration, creating alchemy, by tapping back into the truth of who you are. And one of the listeners, I think this is going to play into lifting to the upper room. There's a question that says, you talk about how creation from fear breeds more fear. Would you talk about creation from fear and dismantling that so we can create in a different way?
Well, let me see if I can answer this. The guides say, the action of fear is to claim more fear. And just as the action of love is to create more love, the guides say every choice made in love has an ongoing lineage. So we're accountable to our choices. Now, I don't understand this as much about dismantling fear. I think it's about dismantling the construct of self that attaches to fear. The guides say we're living in this experience of a world, a shared collective vibratory octave that's been so informed with fear that we don't even see it. We don't even realize how much we're informed by it. And we're often asked to be fearful and then perpetuate it, or we act in fear and call it something else. Being stingy is an act of fear. Being, hateful or harmful or gossiping really is an act of fear if you think about it, because it is not loving, and its intent is, to harm. So what I understand is in the upper room, or this other level of vibrational agreement, fear doesn't exist. And in the workshops that I do, the guides are often lifting people to the upper room. And then the first thing they said is, what are you afraid of? And nobody has anything. It's just not present. The guides say, when we're operating from our knowing, our true knowing, which is, our awareness of who and what we truly are, which must mean we hold that awareness for others. So if I can accept the fact that I am of source, an aspect of the divine, everybody else has to be so as well. It's not about being special. So if I can get to that place of knowing, I can begin to come from a place that's not operating in fear. The guides have said, and it was interesting to me when they explained it, they said, when you're in your knowing, your true knowing, you're never afraid. And I had to look back at my life, and it's true, or it's been true for me. Even if somebody were to give somebody a real tough medical diagnosis, the information about the diagnosis isn't what's fearful. It's what's going to happen next. Is it going to hurt? Am I going to make it? Which is all about projection. The guides are teaching us how to move into the present moment. The attunements support this. And the guides say when you're operating in the present moment, you can operate from your knowing. And when you know, you're not operating in fear. So it's a bit of a flip from the way that we've been trained to navigate a reality. But the key to this seems to be this agreement, which is, again, vibrational accord and alignment to who and what they say we truly are beyond the idea of self. So I can say, I'm Paul, I work as a channel, I used to be a college teacher, I'm staying in Hawaii for a while. I can say all these things, and they're not lies, they're all ways of illustrating myself in this moment or my history. But the truth of the matter is, who I am is expressing beyond that, beyond my gender, beyond my age, beyond my health, beyond my ethnicity. I mean, all of those things are ways of knowing the self, and I'm not denouncing those as experiences, but they're also limited ways of self-knowing. And through the identification with the inherent divine, or the God within, whatever you want to call it, and aligning to that, which is what the guides are teaching us, we begin to have a very, very different experience of being in our lives. That's how I understand it.
Beautiful. And that sort of segues to the next question. Now, one listener wrote in, I'd like to know about tapping into my knowing. I don't know what to do with my life. I feel stuck because I don't know. And it's interesting, he has in quotes, where I should go next.
Well, anytime you're operating with should, you're operating from a system that's based in history. And that isn't necessarily about your knowing. So every should must be predicated on what was once. I should eat lunch, it's noon, is predicated on the idea that lunch should be at noon. I should have a better job is the idea of what should be based in some idea that you've inherited and are agreeing to. So that's the should. So let's just dispense with that, because should isn't your knowing. Should is basically agreement to collective structure, inherited ideas. I'm 40, I should be married by now. You know, I'm 50, I should have saved enough for my retirement. Says who? You know, we're living in a moment right now where so much of what people had planned has gone out the window. You know, we're having,
absolutely,
you know, by nature of a collective experience to be thrust into the present moment. And for some people, this is a high opportunity to learn. Now, the question about knowing is a simple one. We tend to confuse our thinking with our knowing. And the real answer is, when you're in your knowing, there is no question. When you're thinking, there's always a question. So I will often tell people, sometimes the guides will do it, they'll say, go to a type, you know, just go to a time in your life when you knew. I knew the marriage was over. I knew I got the job. I knew he or she wasn't long for this world. Anything that you knew. And remember what it was like to know. And you could do that just by going into your body and into the body memory of knowing. And then go into what you think. So I think I know what I'm having for lunch tomorrow. I think I know how long I'm going to live. I think I know what my best friend is doing at this very moment. You know, every time you think, there's still a question attached. When you're in your knowing, there isn't. And the guides I work with say, when you know, then you act. You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with thinking. It's got its place. It's highly useful, but it's not the same. True knowing, I believe, is claircognizance, which is a psychic gift. And one's true knowing, I believe, is coming from one's intuitive self. Thinking is generally coming through all of the data that we've amassed, that we operate through. It's like the grocery list before we go to the store. You know, I need this, and this. I will need this, and this. Nothing wrong with that, but that's quite different from one's knowing.
Absolutely. There is a definite feeling, a sense that it feels different. So lots of listeners have questions about, you know, I know your journey was not that of a person who set out to channel, like, I want to be a channel. But there are questions about, you know, how do we tap into our intuitive gifts more? And is there some sort of ritualistic thing you do to set the stage, like saging or something like that? I know you do your little prayer, but is there anything else?
Yeah. No, there isn't. People are different. I'm not a trained medium or trained channel. I didn't even really believe in it that much. It's nothing that I looked for. And when it started happening, I had to come to terms with it. My hearing or clairaudience has always come in service to other people. So when I was raised an atheist when I was in my 20s, I started to wake up spiritually and psychically at the same time. I studied a form of healing, and I found that when I had my hands on people, I began to hear things for them, and then it got proven out. They would confirm it, and then I began to trust it a bit more. And then the channeling began sometime thereafter, and that skill developed over many years. I did this work. I was a college teacher at NYU. I wasn't looking to be known for this, but I had a group that met in my apartment pretty steadily for nearly 18 years. And people would put $10 in a basket, and the guides would teach. They didn't start delivering books until, 2000 and 2009 was the first book that they dictated. Now they've done, 9 and 10 years or something. So I don't know how I do it, but I don't know why anybody would want to do it, to be honest with you. Well, true channeling is stenography. True channeling is stenography. Yes. True channeling is not inspiration. It's not gotten me a date. It's not gotten me the lucky numbers. I can work as a psychic too, and I'm an effective one, although my gifts are very specific how I work. But, in terms of what I do to channel before I do any group or any book dictation, I work with a prayer protection, and I do this because it sets a field that I like to work in. But I literally use it to turn the driver's seat and the wheel over to the guides that are working with me, and I climb into the back seat. That's my visualization. I allow my consciousness to recede, and I allow them to come forward. And so what I'm doing is just taking dictation. Hopefully I'm getting it right word for word. None of the books that have come through me have been edited. Occasionally I'll mangle a word when I'm speaking it, or I won't know the word, so I'll use a sound-alike and I'll get the correction. But that's the extent of all the editing. It's pretty non-existent. So, for people that want to do this, I suspect you have to ask for it. And then I think you have to ask to be in your discernment. But I also suggest that if people want to do this, they have to ask what their motives are. There's a lot of stuff floating out. And this isn't about operating in fear. It's about operating in discernment. I sometimes say, my grandma, who's on the other side, who I didn't know all that well, was married 4 times. And she's probably not who I want to go to for relationship advice on the other side. You want to have some discernment. So I want to work with guides that are of the light. And, when people first start opening up and they're eager, then because I meet people that say, my guides are telling me I am here to bring through this modality. I will be the only one who does it. And I will be, and I'm going, wow, well, that sounds like a lot of ego and a lot of flattery. And those are 2 things that I am cautious about. I have other people that come through and say, I've been told that my neighbor wants to kill me, and then it's fear. And you don't listen to that stuff either. That's low-level stuff. Yeah. So to be in discernment is helpful, and I suspect probably to work with someone who can teach it would be helpful. I'm not that guy, and people ask me, and unless the guides say we want to start teaching people how to channel, they do teach people how to move into their own knowing. And I think what's more valuable than spirit communication is really learning how to listen to your true self, to operate from your knowing. Then you're not going outside of the self for help. You're moving to the God within.
Now, as you say that, I think of the Book of Love and Creation, and there is a lot about sort of tapping into one's own knowing and intuitive capacities.
Yeah. That's the one book where they've gone into this, and it's funnily enough, the one book that I've never gone back to since they dictated it.
Really?
Well, the first book was channeled over 2.5 weeks. I didn't even know it was going to happen until 2 days before. I was on the phone with somebody who was listening. I was recording. She was taking notes. I did all the transcriptions, And the guide said that book would be published. It would be the first publisher who read it, and don't haggle. And in fact, that's what happened. It was the first publisher who read it. It wasn't even submitted. It was on the shelf really months after it was dictated. And I was very fortunate, but I think it was all sort of set up. I was working with this woman, Victoria Nelson, who was a colleague of mine in academia. And I had talked about doing another book with the guides. The guys had said it's a trilogy, so I knew there was another book. And I had just ended a friendship that it ended very badly, and I was really heartbroken. And I had an appointment with Vicki to talk about the next book on the phone, and I tried to cancel it because I said, I don't want to do another book. I'm in no shape to do this. And I called her, and we put the recorder on just to see if the guides had any instructions on when this would happen. And they began the dictation that morning, and they didn't stop. And it was a 500-page manuscript. I think it was insane. And I typed every word of it myself, and I've never been able. And for a lot of people, it's their favorite of the books, and there is instruction in psychic development. The other books have been less arduous in some ways, and the best news is that now we send the recordings off to a transcriptionist, so I don't even have to type them, and it takes longer to type these things than it does to deliver them, truthfully. The books are really dictated over about 30 days worth of sessions in most cases. That's it.
I'm glad that was taken off your plate.
Me too. You know, it was
not your zone of genius.
It's not that. It's just, I have a hard enough time with it, and having to listen to myself channel has never been my favorite thing. I mean, if you've heard me channel, I whisper the words, I repeat them. It goes a mile a minute sometimes. Sometimes there's a British accent. I mean, I wouldn't say, it's like not my favorite thing, but I do enjoy seeing the lectures once they're typed. And now, once in a while, when we put up an online video, we'll put them up with subtitles, which I also like. I'd rather read it. There's a real power in the transmission. Well, I'm a spoken channel, and I hear things in fragments. So I'm hearing phrase. It's like one fortune cookie after another. And I don't know what the larger gesture, meaning, or paragraph is going to be. I just hear the fragment. So it's not until it's typed that I get to see that it all made sense, I've been on Maui now for, 4.5 months, and there was a new book. And I thought I was going to start this book in March, and the guide said, no, June. And I thought, what the hell could happen in March to stop me from dictating this book on time? I had all of these live events where I was going to just do the book in front of everybody. They said, no, June. And we all know what happened in March.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wound up on Maui. I was in Costa Rica and New York City, where I lived, shut down, and I ended up on Maui, and they've been dictating a book here in front of, students in my online seminars and a group that convened just to be present for the dictation. And why am I talking about this? I don't know. It's just such a funny experience. But the thing is, they're about 240 pages into this new book. And this time, I haven't read one lecture. I have no idea if this whole thing makes sense. I've just not been willing to go back and read it yet. I think I will when the book is done and see how.
However, do you have that trust that 9 books later?
Yeah, I have to.
We're working on. Yes.
I have to. I drive my friends crazy. I say, oh my God, they're doing a book. I don't know if it makes sense. And they say, Paul, it makes sense. It's happened before. Just shut up. And I go about my business and I do the work. But I've also been, my work has been in live groups for, the last number of years. And I was traveling half the month and doing, some days 10 days of workshops on the road. And it was quite arduous. And here I'm having a very different experience, and my groups have gone online, and they've actually grown. We sometimes have thousands of people now and on for the workshops, which is exciting to me. But it's a very different experience, and I miss being in a room with live people. But I also don't want to go back and read everything just yet, because I feel like, I get to have my own thoughts. When I'm working with the guides, I really am. If you could imagine being a court stenographer and sitting through every day worth of court, and like when you go home and you eat dinner, do you really want to go back and read over the transcripts? And once they're in book form, I will. Yeah, that's it. And I'll learn. I'm learning from the teachings. They're extraordinary, but it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you're on the journey with us in a way as the channel. Yeah. Well, in this case, the stenography is at least uplifting and helpful and useful for life. Mm-hmm. All right.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Paul. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll be back in just a moment. And thank you all for writing in your questions. So grateful for that. Be back in just a minute.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to Sexy Mom Abundant Life. I'm so grateful you're here. As a listener, you can pop over to meetkathywilliams.com and get 20% off any item in the shop, including videos, energy pulls, even private sessions, by entering the code SMRadio. Also at meetkathywilliams.com, you can download a free Create Your Life exercise and join me for online classes and Hawaii retreats. And if you're stuck, helping you get unstuck is my specialty. I'd love to work with you one-on-one.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Sexy Mom Abundant Life. My guest today is Paul Selig, and we are talking about alchemy, creating beyond fear, and tapping into your knowing. Now, I have some questions written in about manifestation, actually. I'm going to kind of coalesce those because there are quite a few. You know, there is so much focus on manifestation these days, and people are asking, what do we ask for that's actually not ego-based, and how do we ask for it to show up?
The guides are talking a lot about this, and especially in the book that they're dictating now, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain it as well as they probably can, or I may be able to once I really understand the teaching myself. The guides have said for a long time, there's nothing wrong with the house on the hill. Somebody gets to live there, but why do you want it? And if you want the fancy house on the hill so that you can be the envy of your neighbors or to make your siblings jealous, you're creating in fear. And the action of fear is to claim more fear. So you're setting yourself up. However, if it's a great house and you would enjoy it and you want to have that experience, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, the guides are teaching something a little different these days about manifestation. And they're really saying that from the upper room, which is, they say, sort of the gateway to the kingdom, and they say the kingdom is the awareness of the inherent divine in all things. You move into a place of receptivity. You're operating in your knowing, so you're no longer asking, you're receiving. And it's this idea that at that level, your needs are met because you've gone into agreement with the source of your needs being met. So it's almost like this idea that I have to ask or I have to say, you know, it's mine, give it to me. Now, the guides have said in the past, you know, about manifestation. Imagine, you know, you're going to the supermarket and you see something on the shelf that you say need. You have to take it off. You have to first decide that you can have it, you can afford it, you can claim it, and then you've got to take it off the shelf and claim it as your own. In a lot of ways, manifestation seems to operate in that kind of a system. The guides say we can only receive what we are in accord to. So much of the process of becoming open to receiving is to clear the obstacles that have prevented us from doing so. I read for somebody the other day in a conference call who was, scrambling with all of her bills and was saying, but this attunement is going to fix that, right? And the guy said, well, no, the attunements aren't about fixing things. They are about aligning to become receptive to the source of all things. And once you understand what the source of all things is, which is not the job you have, and if my source of supply is my job, if my source of love is my partner, if I had one, if my source of security was my bank account, what happens when these things get disrupted or we lose them? And the idea here is we're moving to a level of alignment where we're claiming source as source, or God, or whatever you want to call the energy that permeates all things, as the source of what we require. So the guides are actually talking now about just moving into receptivity. They talk about the gifts of the kingdom and the reception to them, and that's how I understand this. But the books do talk about this, including the one that just came out this week.
Yeah, and it says, as you mentioned in our last conversation too, something to the effect of like, as you step, your path is lit, right? It's lit when it's required.
Yeah, it is. And not a moment before. I mean, here's the funny thing. I've been complaining for years to all my friends that it was time to get out of New York City, and I wanted to live someplace sort of tropical and retreat-like. And, I had this idea of being around community and things like that. And I was looking all over the place. I was looking at houses online in California. I was like, whatever I could afford, I would look. And I got sidetracked to Maui. I had no intention of coming here. I didn't know I was coming here till 24 hours before I got on the plane. A friend of mine said, come here. I couldn't go back home to New York at the time. There was a morgue truck, parking right around the corner from my house. It wasn't the time to go back. And I didn't know whether to stay in Costa Rica. And somebody said, come here. I found you a little place you can stay. Sent me a plane schedule. And so much of what I had hoped for has unfolded here, completely unexpected and not through any actions of my own. And in some ways, in ways that are better than I might have claimed. If I just tried to fix this all myself, I'd probably be living in some community that I didn't like all that much, but, it was okay. And so I'm learning trust in a very, very different way these days, which is it unfolds before you. You can't. Times like these, I don't know that we get to plan in the old way. And I think that actually, for some of us, like me, I'm a big worrier, that becomes an enormous relief because I don't know the outcome. I can't know the outcome. None of us can right now.
Yeah, this time has really made that clear to a lot of people. And as you said, if we can come back to the present moment and be here rather than in our projections or in our need for life to be the way it was or have some, imagined security, we're realizing that that's actually not real. It's just an idea.
Yeah, it is just an idea.
I love it in a way. Yeah, I love that the guides say that a lot about things. It's just an idea. It makes it so real that, it's made up.
Yeah, and because it's just an idea, a new idea can be chosen. The guides say everything that's been named has been named by somebody who came before us. We know what a door is. We know what a window is. We know what a sunset is, and these things have been endowed with meaning. And when you begin to realize that everything is an expression of one source in manifestation or vibration, high vibration or low vibration, your relationship to the manifest world can begin to shift and change. I mean, I'm fortunate that I can do my work now from wherever I live. But I left my security 5 years ago. I left a job I'd had for 25 years at NYU and another job I'd had at Goddard College for 18, where I ran a graduate program. And I stepped into the unknown in faith because it became apparent that it was time. Had I kept those jobs, I actually mostly think that they probably would have been gone by now, given everything that's happened in the world. And,
wow.
It's so interesting to me to understand if we can have some faith or trust that we are being taken care of, even in spite of evidence to the contrary, we will be.
You know, and I'm really thankful for you and for the guides for this because, you know, the more I've read and the more I've tapped into you, you have this wonderful website. I'm not sure if the website itself is called Students of the Guides or that's the program, right? So it's both.
Well, you can studentsoftheguides.com, but it's linked on my website, but it's a subscription series, yes.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because we get to tap into the most recent of conversations. And as I said, you know, and as you mentioned, there's the intellectual level, but there's really the energetic feeling that you know you're being transformed. You know there's change going on in your vibration. And that really has allowed me to soften into life. And that you're right, everything is revealed in the timing, and my small self doesn't need to dictate that. In fact, it doesn't work if it tries to.
Exactly.
So, before we complete, would it be possible for you to maybe help us with an attunement to the upper room or an attunement that would be useful for becoming present?
Yeah. We can do an attunement. Sometimes the guys do them, but I'm getting that I'll do them for now. I don't think we'll take everybody to the upper room. It's a bit more involved, but that's in the text. But you can just, here's one. We could just, if you can say this aloud after me, please. I know who I am in truth.
I know who I am in truth.
I know what I am in truth.
I know what I am in truth.
I know how I serve in truth.
I know how I serve in truth.
I am free, I am free, I am free.
I am free, I am free, I am free.
Okay, and I'm going to explain what people just did. The claim, I know who I am in truth. The guides say what is true is always true. And the true self, or the innate divine, you can call it the Christ within, the inner light, the eternal self, doesn't matter, always knows who it is, who he, she, it is. So that claim is always true. It's spoken at that level. I know what I am in truth, which is the manifestation of the divine in form, the source of all things expressing as form, as who and what you are. And finally, the guides say, I know how I serve in truth simply means how we are most fully expressed as the true self. The claim, I am free, I am free, I am free, is also always true at the level of the true self or the divine self. And this is the claim that allows you to begin to release the bindings or the agreements or the shoulds to the collective that would seek to sort of hold you at the level of fear. And after that, people get to go, people sort of find it much easier to shift in the octave to what they call the upper room. And the claim for that is quite simple. I am in the upper room. And most people can feel the energy shift as they do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was angry yesterday with somebody and I was like, okay, let's change this. And I used that and it really makes a difference. Yeah.
I'm glad.
So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
And everybody, Paul's books are amazing. Alchemy is wonderful. I shared a little passage the other day from it, the elevator passage, and it's just been released actually yesterday, I believe, and it's available at all major retailers. So whether, Paul, do you have a suggestion to start at the beginning? You've done 9 books, or just jump right in wherever you feel called. What do you suggest?
I say go where you're called. The first book, which is called I Am the Word, is foundational to the teachings that follow and is actually helpful to begin with. But this book, Alchemy, is in many ways a standalone book. They do bring the students up to speed. So they say they teach in a one-room schoolhouse. So wherever you go, you'll be taught. That's how I understand it.
Beautiful. Okay, great. Find more about Paul at paulselig.com and me at meetkathywilliams.com. And I'm so grateful to you, Paul. Thank you so much for doing the work you do, for being here. And yes, may the teachings continue to expand life and alignment on planet Earth. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. Aloha.